If someone had told me that love could destroy a man, I would have laughed, until it happened to me. It's strange how one ordinary day can turn into the chapter that changes your life forever. I still remember the sound of the rain that night, soft, rhythmic, almost peaceful. The city lights blurred through my car window as I sat outside her apartment, staring at my phone, trying to convince myself that everything was fine, that she was fine, that we were fine, but deep down I knew something had already broken. Maya and I had been together for 3 years. She wasn't just my girlfriend, she was the person I believed I'd grow old with, the one I defended when my friends joked that she was too perfect, the one I trusted with every piece of my heart. That night she had said she was working late. A presentation, she claimed. She even sent a picture of her desk, coffee cup, laptop open. Proof, I thought. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? When you love someone, you don't question the story you want to believe. But something felt off, the way her voice cracked when she said she'd call me back. The silence that followed, the hours that stretched like years. So I drove. I told myself I'd surprise her. Maybe bring her dinner, something small, something thoughtful. I bought her favorite takeout. The spicy noodles she always said reminded her of home, and headed toward her office. The roads were empty, and every street light flickered, like it was trying to warn me. When I got there, the building was dark. No cars in the parking lot except one, a silver sedan I'd never seen before. My heart started to race, but my mind tried to make sense of it. Maybe a colleague, maybe someone who forgot something, maybe anything else. I called her. Once, twice, no answer. Then I saw her through the glass lobby door, walking down the hall, not alone. She was laughing. That same soft laugh that once belonged to me, and the man beside her, he placed his hand on her back, and she didn't move it away. For a moment, my world just stopped. The rain outside became nothing but white noise. My chest felt hollow, like the air had been punched out of me. I wanted to tell myself I was wrong, that it wasn't what it looked like. But truth doesn't hide behind glass. It hits you straight in the face. They didn't see me. I turned off my car lights and just sat there, watching, waiting, hoping she'd turn around and look guilty. But she didn't. She looked happy, free. I remember gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. Every memory of her, every smile, every promise, replayed in my head like a cruel movie I couldn't escape. All the times she said, "You're the only one who understands me." All the nights she said, "Promise you'll never leave me, das Serdik." And yet there she was, leaving me without a word. I didn't confront her that night. I couldn't. I just drove aimlessly, endlessly, through streets I couldn't name. The rain hit harder, the roads blurred, and I kept hearing her laughter echoing in my head. When I finally reached home, I sat in silence for hours. My phone buzzed. It was her. A simple message: "Sorry, got caught up at work. I'll call you tomorrow. Lesset," and work. That word broke something inside me. I didn't reply. I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, wondering how a person could lie so easily and still sound so sincere. I think that's the moment I realized betrayal doesn't always come with screams or tears. Sometimes it's quiet, subtle, a knife wrapped in silk. By morning, I felt empty. I wanted to be angry, but I couldn't even feel that. Just a numb ache that sat behind my ribs. I went to work like nothing happened. I smiled when people asked how we were doing. Sent her a good morning text, pretending. Because pretending was easier than accepting the truth. But something inside me had changed. The man who used to believe in love, in loyalty, in forever, he started fading that night. And as I stood by the window, watching the sunrise after a sleepless night, I whispered to myself, "She thinks I'll cry forever, but she doesn't know what she started to laugh." That night something inside me broke. But I didn't know then, it was just the beginning. Before everything fell apart, there was a time when love felt real, when life seemed simple, and her smile was the reason I believed in tomorrow. It's strange to look back now, knowing how it ended, and still feel warmth in those memories. But that's the truth about love. Even when it dies, the echoes stay. I met Maya 3.5 years ago at a friend's birthday dinner. I wasn't even planning to go that night. I'd had one of those exhausting work days, endless meetings, fake smiles, the kind of day that drains your soul. My friend Daniel insisted. He said, "Come on, man, you've been locked up in your office too long. You need to breathe." I gave in. I didn't know that decision would change everything. When I walked into that restaurant, she was the first person I noticed. Not because she was loud or trying to be the center of attention. Quite the opposite. She was sitting quietly at the far end of the table, scrolling through her phone, half smiling at something on the screen. Her calmness stood out in the noise, and when she looked up for a second, it felt like her eyes met mine on purpose. Daniel introduced us halfway through dinner. Erin, meet Maya. She just joined our firm's marketing team last month. She extended her hand, and I remember her handshake. Firm but warm. I've heard your name around, she said with that effortless confidence. I didn't know it then, but that confidence would be one of the first things to both attract and blind me. Yeah, we started talking small things at first. Music, travel, books we never finished. She laughed easily, not in that forced way people do to be polite. I remember thinking, she makes silence feel comfortable. That night, we ended up being the last two to leave. It was raining, light, misty rain, the kind that softens everything. I offered to walk her to her car. She said she'd rather walk a little longer and talk. We walked through empty streets, sharing stories about childhood dreams, old heartbreaks, and fears we never admitted out loud. I told her about how my parents' divorce had made me skeptical about love. She listened without judgment, just quiet understanding. That was the moment I felt something shift inside me. She made me believe I could finally stop running from my past. From then on, Maya became a constant in my life. Morning texts turned into evening calls. Coffee dates turned into late-night drives. I'd never felt so seen before. She remembered the small. She remembered the small things, how I took my coffee, the songs I played when I couldn't sleep, the way I rubbed my wrist when I was nervous. She made me feel like I mattered, like I wasn't just another face in the crowd. And she wasn't just beautiful, she was ambitious. That fire in her eyes when she talked about her goals drew me in. She wanted to build something of her own, a business, a life, a name. I don't want to depend on anyone, she used to say, smiling. Not even you. I admired that. I thought it made her strong. Maybe it did. Maybe it also made her dangerous. We built a rhythm together. Friday night takeouts, Sunday morning hikes, movie marathons that always ended with her falling asleep on my shoulder halfway through. Every memory felt like a scene from a movie I never wanted to end. There was one night, though, that stands out more than the rest. We were lying on the rooftop of my apartment, the city lights glowing below us. She looked at me and said, "Aaron, promise me something." "What's that?" I asked. "Promise me that no matter what happens, you won't give up on us." Kemper Firken Habru. I laughed and said, "You're talking like we're in a drama." She smiled faintly. "Maybe we are." Yeah. At the time, I thought it was just one of those romantic lines people say when they're happy. I didn't realize it was foreshadowing. The months rolled by, and life was good. Too good. I'd never been so focused, so motivated. I wanted to give her everything, not just gifts, but stability, security, a future. I worked harder than ever, even took extra shifts. When she mentioned her dream of starting a small marketing agency, I started saving, quietly planning to surprise her one day with the seed money. But I should have seen the signs. The little comments she made about wanting more luxury, more attention, more success, at first, they felt harmless. "Don't you ever want to travel first class?" She'd tease. Or, "Imagine living in a place where we can see the skyline every morning." I laughed it off. She was just dreaming big, I told myself. But sometimes I caught a glint in her eyes, like she wasn't dreaming with me, she was dreaming past me. And still I ignored it. Love makes you blind to the red flags waving right in front of you. I thought her long hours at work meant she was chasing her goals. I thought her silence meant she was tired. I thought her late replies meant she was busy. Every doubt that whispered in my mind, I silenced it with trust. One evening while we were out for dinner, I noticed the way she kept checking her phone. Every few minutes her eyes darted to the screen, and her smile dimmed slightly when I asked if everything was okay. "Just work," she said. "You know how clients are." I nodded. I believed her. Because that's what love does. It teaches you to believe the best in someone, even when you should prepare for the worst. That night when I dropped her off, she turned and said, "You're too good to me, Aaron." I smiled. "That's because you deserve it." She looked at me, quiet for a second, and then whispered, "I hope you still think that one day." At the time, I didn't understand what she meant. Now, I wish I had. Love in its purest form feels like peace. But when that peace is built on lies, it becomes the calm before the storm. I didn't know it then, but my storm was already forming quietly, patiently, just beyond the horizon. Looking back now, I could still see us laughing, holding hands, believing we were unstoppable. And maybe in that moment we were. But I should have noticed the cracks forming, because love makes you blind. They say distance doesn't destroy a relationship, silence does. And for us, silence started to grow like cracks in the walls we'd built together. It began slowly. So slowly that I almost didn't notice. Maya started missing my calls. At first, it was small things. She'd text, "Busy in a meeting, call you later." And she did call, sometimes hours later, sounding tired but affectionate. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. After all, she had always been ambitious, driven, passionate about her work. I told myself this was just part of her chasing her dream. But soon, those missed calls turned into missed days. Her replies got shorter, her laughter quieter. And that warmth in her voice that once made me feel like the center of her world started fading. Hey, are you okay? I'd ask. Yeah, just work stress, she'd say with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Every time she had an explanation ready, and every time I told myself I was overthinking, but I wasn't. I was watching the woman I loved slip away, inch by inch, word by word. I started noticing the little things first, how she'd suddenly guard her phone when I was around, or how she'd step away to take certain calls. Her perfume started changing. So did her schedule. Late meetings became team dinners, and weekends together became urgent deadlines. I wanted to ask questions, but a part of me was scared of the answers, so I stayed quiet. Because when you love someone, you'd rather drown in doubt than face the truth that might end everything. My friend Daniel noticed before I did. One evening over drinks, he said, "Man, you look exhausted." "Everything okay with you and Maya?" "Yeah, she's just busy," I replied too quickly. He gave me that look, the one that says, "I don't believe you, but I won't push." And then he added softly, "Aaron, sometimes bittersy is just another word for going." I laughed it off. I wish I hadn't. Days turned into weeks, and I kept waiting for things to go back to normal. I tried everything, surprise visits, sweet message, even planned a weekend trip to the mountains, just the two of us, away from work, away from distractions. I imagined the laughter, the peace, the way it used to be. When I told her about it, she smiled politely. "That's sweet, Aaron, but I don't think I can take a break right now. Things are crazy at the office." "It's just 2 days," I said, trying to sound casual. "You need a break, we both do." Can Naparastan her? She looked down at her phone. "Let's do it next month, okay?" But next month never came. That night, I stared at the tickets I'd booked, wondering when we stopped wanting the same things. Every unanswered call felt like a silent rejection. Every maybe later felt like a slow goodbye. She started hanging out more with her colleagues. I'd ask who they were, and she'd wave it off with, "You wouldn't know them." When I asked to meet them someday, she changed the subject. I began doubting myself. Was I being too needy? Too controlling? Maybe she really was just overwhelmed. Maybe I was the problem. I remember one Friday night vividly. We'd planned to meet for dinner at our favorite cafe. I waited for over an hour. Texted her twice, called 3 times. Nothing. Just silence when she finally replied, "It was midnight. Sorry, couldn't make it. Something came up. Yeah, I read that text over and over like the words would somehow make sense. The 10th time around, they didn't. The next morning, Daniel called. "Aaron, you've got to stop pretending this is fine. What do you mean?" "She's slipping away, man. You can feel it. I can see it. I stayed quiet. There was nothing to say." He sighed. "Look, maybe it's time you stop chasing someone who's already walking out the door." I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that Maya loved me, that this was just a phase. But my heart knew better. Still, I refused to give up. That weekend, I decided to surprise her at her office, just to check on her, to see her smile again, to remind her that I was still here. When I arrived, she wasn't there. Her coworkers said she'd left early. I called her, no answer. Again, I sat in my car for a long time, staring at her contact name on my phone, my thumb hovering over the screen. I wanted to text something, anything, but I didn't know what to say anymore. What do you say when the person you love has become a stranger? The distance between us wasn't just physical anymore. It was emotional, invisible, but heavier than anything I'd ever felt. I started noticing how she'd avoid eye contact when we talked, how she'd smile at her phone while claiming she was just scrolling through work messages, how she stopped saying "I love you" first. One evening when I couldn't take it anymore, I asked, "Are you sure we're okay?" She looked at me, expressionless, and said, "Why wouldn't we be?" I searched her face for something. Anything real. But all I saw was indifference. That night, when she left my apartment, something inside me whispered that I'd just seen her for the last time, at least the version of her that once loved me. I spent that night pacing my living room, trying to piece together what went wrong. I replayed every conversation, every moment, every missed call like a detective trying to solve a case with no clues. And maybe I worked too much, maybe I didn't listen enough, maybe she needed something I couldn't give. But deep down, a darker thought kept crawling up. Maybe she had already found it, somewhere else. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I told myself I'd get answers. I drove to her place again, hoping I was just being paranoid, hoping I'd find her alone, tired, stressed, anything but what my gut was warning me about, and then saw something that shattered me completely. That night, when she left my apartment, something inside me told me it was over. I just didn't have the courage to admit it yet. For days after, I lived in denial, checked her social media more than I checked my own pulse. Told myself that the late nights, the silences, the distance were just phases. Everyone goes through rough patches, right? But deep down, a quiet part of me was whispering, "You're losing her." And then one evening, that whisper became a scream. It was a Thursday. I remember because I had left work early, determined to fix things once and for all. I thought maybe if I showed up at her apartment with her favorite food, flowers, and that little note that said, "I still believe in us," it might remind her of what we once were. As I parked outside her building, the air felt strange, heavy like the world was holding its breath. King, I walked up the steps, heart pounding harder with every floor. I didn't even know why I was nervous. Maybe because some part of me already knew what was waiting. When I reached her door, I lifted my hand to knock, but stopped. There were voices inside, her voice, and another one, a man's. At first, I froze. Maybe it was just a friend, I've told myself, a coworker, a neighbor. But then I heard her laugh, that same soft, tender laugh that used to belong to me. I don't remember deciding to open the door. I just did. The sight hit me like a punch I never saw coming. Maya was standing by the window, holding a wine glass, and next to her was a man I'd never seen before. He was leaning close, whispering something that made her smile. My flowers fell from my hand before I even realized I'd dropped them. The sound made them both turn. Her expression, shock first, then guilt, and finally indifference, like she'd already rehearsed this moment. "Hey, Aaron," she said quietly, like she was addressing a stranger at her door. The man stepped back, clearly uncomfortable. "I should go," he muttered, grabbing his jacket, but I didn't move. I couldn't. My chest felt tight, my throat dry. I wanted to speak, to ask why, but no words came out. She sighed. "You weren't supposed to see this." I laughed, a broken, bitter laugh. "You mean I wasn't supposed to find out?" Her eyes softened, and for a second I thought I saw regret, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. "It's not what you think," she said. "That line, the oldest line in the book." "Akin, Maya," I whispered. "I've defended you to everyone. Every late night, every lie. I believed you." She looked away. "I never meant to hurt you." "Then why did you?" I asked, the words trembling out. She stayed silent. Anka, the world outside was moving. Cars passing, people talking, life going on. But in that room, time stood still. I could hear my heartbeat echoing in the silence between us. Finally, she looked at me and said softly, "You'll move on, Aaron. You always do." That broke me. Not because of the words, but because she said them like she'd already closed the chapter, like I was just another story she was done reading. I turned to leave, but before I walked out, I glanced back one last time. "You're right," I said quietly. "I will move on, but not the way you think, okay?" And as I stepped out into the cold night air, I realized something had changed. She took my trust, my love, my peace, but what she didn't know was that she'd also given me a reason. That night, something inside me didn't just break, it awoke. And the man who walked away wasn't the same one who walked in. People talk about heartbreak like it's an emotion, like something you can feel and then heal from. But what I went through wasn't just heartbreak, it was a slow death of everything I thought I was. And for weeks after that night, I became a ghost in my own life. Work didn't matter. Friends didn't matter. Food didn't taste like anything. I'd wake up every morning hoping it had all been a bad dream, that maybe I'd check my phone and find a message from her saying, "I'm sorry. Can we talk?" But the only thing waiting was silence. I stopped going to work on time, deadlines piled up. My boss called me in one day, his tone half concerned, half disappointed. "Aaron, you've been off lately." "Everything okay?" I lied. "Yeah, just not sleeping well." He nodded, but I could tell he didn't buy it. I didn't care, because honestly, I wasn't sleeping well. I wasn't sleeping at all. Every night, my mind replayed that moment, the wine glass, her laughter, her eyes when she said, "You'll move on." That line haunted me. It echoed in every silence, in every song on the radio, in every reflection I caught of myself. Yeah, it's strange how quickly love can turn into an obsession, not with the person, but with the pain they left behind. And Daniel tried to pull me out of it. One night, he showed up at my place with pizza and 2 beers. Genny met her soul cam and a gag. "You look like hell, man," he said, dropping onto the couch. "Thanks," I muttered. And he stared at me for a while before asking, "You've been here all week, haven't you?" I didn't answer. He already knew. He sighed. "Aaron, listen, I know it hurts, but you can't let her story end yours." I laughed bitterly. "What story?" She moved on. "I'm the one stuck in the past." "You can get. Then get unstuck," he said firmly. "Not for her, for you." King. That night, after he left, I sat alone in the dark, staring at the empty pizza box. His words kept circling in my head. You can't let her story end yours. Days blurred together. I'd go to work, come home, sit in silence. I deleted her number, only to memorize it again hours later. I'd open her social media just to see if she looked happier, and she did. That smile that once made my day now made me feel like I never existed. It was pathetic. I knew it. But pain doesn't care about pride. Sometimes I'd walk through the city at night just to feel something real. The noise, the lights, the strangers, at least they reminded me that life was still happening, even if I wasn't part of it anymore. I remember sitting on a park bench one cold evening, watching couples pass by, laughing, holding hands, sharing secrets. For the first time, I wasn't angry at them. I was jealous of how simple it all looked. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, something inside me started to shift. I realized that no one was coming to save me. Not Daniel, not time, not forgiveness. If I wanted to stop feeling broken, I had to start rebuilding. It wasn't dramatic. There was no sudden moment of clarity, just small steps. Okay? I started running again, the same park where I'd once sat in tears. I cleaned my apartment, threw out everything that reminded me of her, the photos, the gifts, even that stupid coffee mug she'd left behind. And every piece I threw away felt like taking back a little control. Daniel noticed, you seem better? Hey, he said on a Friday afternoon. Trying to be, I replied. I smiled. Rauch while I'm trying to be, I replied. He smiled. Good, because you don't deserve to be anyone's ghost. He was right. For the first time in months, I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't see a broken man, just someone scarred, still standing. The pain was still there, but it didn't own me anymore. It fueled me. Every night I'd sit by the window watching the city lights, thinking about everything that happened, the lies, the betrayal, the silence, and each time I whispered to myself, never again. I wasn't sure what came next. I just knew one thing. If love broke me, revenge would rebuild me. For a long time after it happened, I thought revenge would look like a scream, loud, sudden, satisfying. But what I learned is that the most dangerous kind of revenge is quiet. It's the patient kind. The kind that builds itself while everyone else is looking the other way. I started small. I stopped checking her social media. I stopped replaying her words like a broken record. Instead, I opened a notebook and started writing down one thing, what I wanted my life to be, if I ever stopped letting that moment own me. At first, the list was simple. Sleep on time, run 3 times a week, finish the project I'd been postponing. But slowly, the small stuff turned into plans that had teeth, finish the certification I'd always joked about, pitch that marketing idea I'd buried in a drawer, stop waiting for permission to be good. Work became my workshop. I poured myself into learning, late nights studying analytics, mornings teaching myself presentation skills, weekends building a portfolio of real campaigns I could show, not talk about. I reconnected with clients I'd lost touch with, not to beg but to offer better work. I read books on persuasion and branding until phrases began to feel like tools I could hold. Daniel watched me rebuild with this strange mix of skepticism and relief. You're different, he said once, passing me a cup of coffee at 2 in the morning. You don't look broken anymore. I don't feel broken, I replied. I feel busy. That busyness was deliberate. I learned to be occupied by creation instead of consumed by what was gone. Months passed, and those months were quieter than I expected. There were no explosive moments, no dramatic confrontations. There were only meetings where I didn't flinch, proposals I sent without second-guessing, and a slow stacking of credibility. The more work I produced, the less my past defined me. My portfolio grew, real results, real numbers, case studies where I could show the before and after. People started to notice. Maya had always dismissed some of my ideas as too small or not scalable. She loved the shine of big launches and the quick applause. So I decided to play to that, but on my terms. I launched a campaign for a local brand that had been stuck for years. It was simple, honesty-driven storytelling paired with a micro-influencer network. It required patience, careful coordination, and genuine relationships, things Maya never cared to build because they didn't promise instant headlines. The campaign worked better than anyone expected. Sales climbed, engagement numbers ticked up, and the brand owner called me with a voice full of gratitude. I don't know how you did it, she said, but people are finally listening. Hearing that felt better than any insult I'd ever wanted to throw at Maya. It felt like proof that quiet, careful work could make a noise louder than cheap fame, word spread. Small clients recommended me, a regional agency took notice and offered a partnership. I said yes. I hired 2 people, talented, hungry people who believed in the same long game I did. We worked in a cramped office that smelled like coffee and ambition. I watched pitches I once would have been too timid to lead. I learned to say no to projects that didn't match our values. My brand grew on a backbone of integrity. And while I was building that, I kept my eyes open, not to stalk her, but to understand. Maya's world, once glamorous and fast, showed cracks I hadn't wanted to notice before. The shiny launches she bragged about often had no follow-through. The big client wins, sometimes collaborations. The big client wins were sometimes collaborations where her role was smaller than she let on. People I met in the industry trusted her surface-level flair but whispered about missing receipts and borrowed ideas. Nothing dramatic, just patterns. Patterns that, when you connect the dots, tell a story. I didn't act on rumors. I collected facts. One night, long after the sleepless weeks and the months of rebuilding, an opportunity landed in my lap. A mid-sized brand was planning a national launch and needed a creative lead. Maya's agency had been touted as part of the proposal. They'd been on the deck as a key partner. The client called to ask for references and for a detailed rollout plan. They wanted proof of previous campaigns, metrics, original assets. I could have ignored it. I could have kept my success private and let karma play its slow game. But I had a different plan. I reached out to the client and offered them a simple thing: a transparent presentation of what a genuine campaign looks like: strategy, prep, execution, and clear, auditable results. I showed them case studies from my work and from the partners I trusted. I offered to walk them through everything, with dates, timestamps, signed creative files, and client testimonials. No theatrics. Just paper and proof. Curiosity led the client back to me, and with their permission, I began to dig. I looked at the materials that had been attached to Maya's agency's pitch. At first glance, they glittered with design and confident headlines, but when I dug deeper, when I checked timestamps, asked for original files, and reached out to a few of the people listed as contributors, inconsistencies emerged. Sapa, a campaign credited to Maya's agency, had drafts that matched almost exactly a concept I'd once pitched in an offhand meeting to another director. Other bits had stock imagery attributed as original photography. Small things, but each one a crack. I presented the client what I had found, not with malice, but with clarity. I showed timelines, original emails, and the real people behind the work. The client was stunned, not because they wanted to be cruel, but because they had entered into a partnership under false pretenses. They pulled back. They asked questions of Maya's agency. The agency's responses were thin, defensive, and ultimately hollow. This didn't happen overnight. It wasn't a single dramatic moment on a stage. It was a slow unwinding where credibility, the currency Maya thought she had bought, began to evaporate. The client's trust shifted toward the people who offered transparency. My team's reputation grew because we had nothing to hide. When the news spread inside our industry, it wasn't cruelty that pushed it. It was facts. The difference between someone who builds on borrowed lights and someone who builds from the ground up is visible if you know where to look. People started to ask tougher questions. Colleagues who had once been dazzled by Maya's shine began to notice it was surface deep. Partners who had praised her found themselves explaining missed deadlines and overpromised results. Reputation, once inflated, has a way of deflating in public. There was a moment at an industry gala that felt cinematic, and yet it wasn't theatrical. Maya walked into the room like she'd always owned it. Cameras flashed. People who had toasted her months ago now offered measured smiles. Somewhere in the back, a client she'd once counted on stood and quietly explained the gaps they'd found. It wasn't a loud accusation, it was a business conversation where truth was obvious to everyone who cared to listen. She noticed me across the room. For a second, I saw the same flicker in her eyes I'd seen the night she left. A flash of something like panic or maybe calculation. She had expected me to be some ruined version of myself, scrolling through pity. Instead, she saw a man who carried himself with calm, careful pride. Not cruel, not triumphant, just unbothered. That was the power shift. I hadn't set out to humiliate her, I had simply outlasted her tactics. While she traded on borrowed stories and borrowed lights, I built a life people could verify. I let truth do the work where anger would have failed. The poetic part, the part I wanted when I pictured revenge, came not in a scream but in quiet satisfaction. The people who had once applauded her began to listen to someone else. Contracts moved, invitations changed. She found doors closing not because I had pushed them, but because she had hollowed them out herself. She built her lies on my silence. I built my revenge on her expectations. It happened on a Thursday, one of those ordinary days that quietly decide to change everything. I was scheduled to speak at a marketing conference downtown. My talk wasn't anything grand, just a session on authentic branding and the power of truth in storytelling. The irony wasn't lost on me. The room was full industry leaders, young entrepreneurs, journalists, even a few familiar faces from agencies I'd once tried to impress. I'd grown used to public speaking by then. My hands didn't shake anymore, my voice didn't crack. It felt good to stand tall again, not as someone trying to prove himself, but as someone who already had. Again, halfway through the session, as I moved from one slide to the next, I saw her, Maya, sitting 3 rows from the front, perfectly still, like a ghost I'd summoned by accident. For a moment, my breath caught, not because of longing, but because of recognition. It was surreal to see her not through memory, but in real life again. She looked different. Ewan, but same perfect posture. But there was something brittle in her expression, like a mask that had been worn too long. Our eyes met for half a second, and I saw a flicker of something she used to hide so well, fear. But I didn't stop. I kept talking. I spoke about integrity, about how real connection comes from honesty, not performance, about how trust, once broken, can't be bought back with charm. It has to be rebuilt, brick by brick, with proof. Each sentence was about business, but every word was for her. When the applause came, it wasn't thunderous. It was sincere. People came up afterward, shaking my hand, exchanging cards, asking questions. I smiled, answered, thanked them. When the crowd thinned, I turned, and there she was, standing a few feet away, waiting. And for a moment, neither of us spoke. The noise around us faded, just the faint sound of glasses clinking and polite chatter. Again, finally, she said softly, "You look different, Aaron." I smiled. Not out of pride, but peace. That's what happens when you stop crying. She hesitated. I saw your presentation. You've really come far. Yeah, I said. Funny what a little honesty can do. She bit her lip, glancing away, then back at me. I know what you think of me. But things weren't as simple as they looked. Maybe not, I replied, calm and measured. But the truth usually isn't complicated. People make it complicated when they have something to hide, she sighed. I never wanted things to end the way they did. I tilted my head. You ended them exactly how you wanted, Maya. I just wasn't the man you expected me to become afterward. That made her look up, her eyes softened, almost pleading. Aaron, I heard what happened with the agency. I lost a lot. People won't even work with me anymore. You have no idea how hard it's been. Oh, Ken, I held her gaze. You're right. I don't know how hard it's been for you, but I know how hard it was for me to put my life back together after you broke it, piece by piece, while you smiled through it. Silence, heavy, real. She tried to smile, the same half-sweet expression she used to use to melt tension. You're still angry, no, I said. That's the difference. I'm angry en wang peri super stwerer and can kempi superi sumbadend. That's the difference. I'm not angry anymore. Can. I took a step closer, my voice low, steady. You once told me I'd move on. You were right about that. But what you didn't see coming was that I'd move up. And her lips parted slightly, as if to say something, but there was nothing left to say. Around us, people were still mingling, still talking about ideas and opportunities. But for me, time slowed down. I wasn't standing across from the woman who betrayed me anymore. I was standing across from a chapter I'd already closed. No, she whispered. A lang time no shell madamau, she whispered. You've changed. Yeah, I said quietly. So did the story. Ken, I turned to leave, but before I walked away, I looked back once and said, take care of yourself, Maya. I mean that. She nodded slowly, but I could see it in her eyes. The realization, the sting, the understanding that the power she once held over me was gone for good. Outside, the city lights felt different that night, brighter, freer. The air carried no bitterness, just release. Hey, Keiko. I walked past the glass doors and saw my reflection. Not the broken man I once was, but someone who had earned his peace the hard way. And for years, I thought closure would come from seeing her suffer. But standing there, I realized it came from something simpler, from knowing I didn't need to see her hurt at all. Her actions had written their own consequences. Mine had rewritten my future. For the first time, I wasn't angry. And I was free. The evening air was still, the kind that feels heavy with quiet meaning. A week had passed since I saw Maya again. I hadn't thought about her much, not because I was avoiding it, but because, for the first time in years, I didn't need to. The storm inside me had finally gone silent. I sat on the balcony of my apartment, overlooking the city lights. The skyline shimmered like a living thing, constant, beautiful, untamed. Below, people moved through the streets like tiny fragments of stories, each chasing their own endings. Somewhere down there, Maya existed too, just another soul trying to find her peace. And strangely, I didn't wish her harm anymore. I used to think revenge would heal me. that if she saw me succeed, if she saw what I'd become, I'd finally feel complete. But when that moment came, when her eyes met mine and I saw her walls crumble, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt released, like the weight I'd been carrying all this time wasn't her betrayal anymore. It was my need to make her see it. Revenge was never about her. It was about me refusing to accept that pain could exist without justice. But life doesn't always hand out justice neatly wrapped in apologies or second chances. Sometimes it gives you something better, understanding. I took a slow sip of coffee, watching the last light of sunset melt into orange and blue. There was peace in the simplicity of it, no grand finale, no applause, just quiet realization. I'd survived the fire, but more than that, I'd learned to walk through it without letting it burn me again. Maya had once said I was too sensitive to survive in this world. That kindness was a weakness, but I'd learned that sensitivity wasn't my flaw, it was my compass. It allowed me to feel deeply, to care, to rebuild. She used manipulation to rise, I used honesty to rebuild. One crumbled, one endured. The universe has a strange way of balancing things, not through punishment, but through perspective. She'd lost credibility in a world built on pretense. I'd gained purpose in one built on truth. Some nights, I still think about the boy I was back then, naive, hopeful, desperate to be seen. He loved with open hands, not realizing some people only take. I used to resent him for being so blind. Now, I thank him because his heart, though broken, taught me everything about strength. Pain carves out the space where wisdom grows. It humbles you, but it also remakes you. And I'd found meaning in the work I did, the people I helped, the things I created. My life wasn't about proving her wrong anymore. It was about proving myself right, that I could live, love, and succeed without bitterness. It started to rain, a soft drizzle that blurred the city lights into watercolor streaks. I didn't move. I let it touch my skin cold and clean. It felt symbolic somehow, like the last traces of an old story being washed away. There was no music, no dialogue, just the quiet sound of freedom, freedom from resentment, freedom from needing closure from someone who never had the power to give it, freedom from my own past. And I thought about reaching for my phone, maybe scrolling through old photos, but I didn't. I deleted them all long ago, not out of spite, but because memories, like wounds, only heal when you stop reopening them. In that rain-soaked silence, I finally understood something simple. Peace isn't something you find after revenge. It's something you earn after forgiveness, not for them, but for yourself. Months later, at another event, someone asked me during a Q&A, "What's your biggest lesson in success?" I smiled and said that success isn't proving others wrong, it's proving to yourself that you were always enough. They applauded, but I wasn't speaking for the room. I was speaking for that version of me who once stayed up at night replaying her betrayal, thinking it defined him. Didn't, it refined him. And that, I realized, was the difference between pain and power. One consumes you, the other shapes you. As the night deepened, the rain stopped. I stood breathing in the scent of wet earth and renewal. The city glittered, alive again, I whispered to the empty sky, not out of sadness but gratitude. Because every heartbreak, every mistake, every sleepless night had led me here, to peace, to purpose, to me. She thought I'd cry forever, but I learned to smile without her.